Magnitude and evolution of SES school segregation of Chilean education. Table 1 presents our estimates of the level of SES segregation of the Chilean school-going population for the period between 1999 and 2008. Estimates are presented for all the years and grades for which the required information was available. The first panel contains the values of the Duncan Dissimilarity Index estimated for the students whose families were classified in the lowest 30% of the Socioeconomic Index, and the second panel presents the D index for the students coming from the highest 30% of the SES index. The results presented in Table 1 allow us to draw several conclusions. First, the level of SES segregation of the school-going population is very high in Chile. For example, the D index for 4th grade low SES students in 2008 was 0.54. Recall that the literature defines the index values of 0.6 as hypersegregation, which implies that in order to have an homogeneous distribution of disadvantaged students among schools, it will be necessary to transfer 54% of those students from schools with high to low concentrations of disadvantaged students. In fact, the SES school segregation was comparatively higher than the corresponding SES residential segregation estimated by Larrañaga and Sangüesa, 2007. For the Chilean population as a whole, which ranged between 0.20 and 0.36 for 2002. Second, during the study decade, the level of SES school segregation had a moderate upward trend in Chile. Although with different strength, this tendency was identifiable in all series of Table 1. The most extensive series of comparable data were available to 4th graders. According to the result between 1999 and 2008, the D index increased from 0.51 to 0.54 and from 0.58 to 0.60 for the students from the lowest and highest 30% SES respectively. The increase in school segregation was not clearly linked to a similar trend in residential segregation in the Chilean cities, since Larrañaga and Sangüesa 2007 estimated a slight decrease in the D index for the SES residential segregation between 1992 and 2002. For two of their three poverty indexes, with the third remaining stable. Third, low SES Chilean students were more segregated in primary schools than in secondary schools, although this difference tended to decrease during the studied period. For high SES students, the level of school segregation was similar in both primary and secondary schools. Finally, the level of SES school segregation for high SES students was higher. In fact, Table 1 shows that this pattern was true for all the index estimates for the corresponding grade level groups. According to our findings, the high SES Chilean students were hyper-segregated in 2008 in both primary and secondary schools, with an estimated D-index of 0.61 for students from primary level and 0.59 for those from secondary schools. Public versus private SES school segregation according to the type of school. As explained, one of the key features of the Chilean education is the distinction between schools according to their ownership status, private, public, and their main source of funding, state subsidy family payments. Which creates a system of three categories: public, voucher private, and non-subsidized private. We estimated national level SES school segregation separately from each type of school. In other words, we defined each type of school as an educational subsystem in order to comparatively estimate its level of internal segregation. Table 2 contains the main results for both low and high SES students. The findings consistently indicate for all available estimates that low SES students are less segregated in public than in private schools, and the same applies comparing state-funded private schools with non-subsidized private schools. As shown in Table 2, the differences in the level of segregation for low SES students among the three types of schools are noticeably. This pattern is also presented in the estimated school segregation for high SES students, but the differences among the three types of schools are less pronounced in this case. Note that although public schools tend to be less segregated, the D-index for low SES and especially for high SES students attending public schools is relatively high, which suggests that certain structural aspects of the Chilean society, example residential segregation and its educational system, example school choice and student selection processes, could account for the observed SES school segregation. Lastly, the estimates included in the Table 2 show an apparent trend toward an increase in SES school segregation during the period under analysis within the two types of private schools, both in primary and secondary schools, for low SES and high SES students. This tendency of increasing SES segregation is also observed among public secondary schools. SES school segregation in urban areas. Although SES school segregation tends to be larger in rural areas due to the relative dispersion that characterizes the rural population, which makes it difficult for the school to effectively integrate various population groups. From an educational policy perspective, the issue of socioeconomic segregation is more pertinently studied in urban settings, given the fact that this segregation is potentially linked to educational policy decisions, school organization, and family decisions. Thus, in order to study in depth the relationship between SES school segregation and the local market dynamics of Chilean education, in the remaining sections of the paper, we focus on the school segregation of low SES students in urban areas. Firstly, we recalculated the dissimilarity index at national level only for schools situated in urban areas, and as expected, the estimates were slightly lower than the previously discussed for the entire country, but the general pattern were the same. For example, for fourth grade students in 2006, the D index was 0.51 for urban schools, while for the whole country was 0.53. Similarly, the trend of increasing SES school segregation, especially in secondary schools, also applied to urban areas, both at the country level for the three different types of schools. Then we estimated SES school segregation at the local level. Our findings suggested that the mentioned rise in urban schools SES segregation has been a generalized phenomenon among Chilean municipalities. Between 1999 and 2006, 86% of the 159 municipalities included in the analysis showed an increase in their estimated level of SES school segregation. Figure 1 depicts this trend graphically for fourth grade students. Each municipality is represented by a circle. The horizontal axis shows the municipal value of the D index for 1999, and the vertical axis shows the same for 2006. If the municipalities had maintained their level of segregation in both measurements, the circles will lie on the diagonal line. Circles under the diagonal indicate municipalities with a decrease in segregation between both measurements, while municipalities with increased segregation lie above the diagonal. Thus, the vertical distance to the diagonal shows the magnitude of the change in school segregation. As shown, although Chilean municipalities vary greatly in terms of their magnitude and change of SES school segregation level, most of them were increasing their school segregation. In fact, 20% of all municipalities had increased in school segregation of over 10% points between 1999 and 2006. The corresponding weighted national average was about 4% points. Finally, figure 1 also shows a sizable level of heterogeneity in the estimated SES school segregation among Chilean municipalities, ranging from 0.21 to 0.84 in 2006. We found that the observed D index tended to be greater in municipalities with larger populations, lower poverty rates, higher number of schools, and higher presence of private schools. In the next sections, we capitalize on these variations to conduct multiple regression analysis oriented to better understand the relationship between SES school segregation and local level factors. The market dynamics factor related to SES school segregation in Chilean urban areas. The level of SES segregation of the school-going population is the result of a complex wave of educational, social, demographic, and economic factors, among others. Therefore, in order to know whether or not there is a link between student segregation and the market mechanisms functioning in the Chilean educational system, we studied the relationship between the observed municipal level variation in the SES school segregation and several relevant characteristics of the Chilean municipalities. Specifically, we conducted cross-section multiple regression analysis at municipal level. We used the D index for the 30% low SES fourth grade students in urban areas and the outcome variable and the defined educational local market variables as the main predictors. We also controlled for several covariates, including residential segregation in some regression models. Table 3 contains the key results of those analyses. Model 1 and 2 were fitted using the larger sample of 159 municipalities with at least 5 urban schools, which jointly represented 92% of the total urban fourth-grade enrollments for the year 2006. The outcome variable was the 2006 index. In turn, Model 3 and 4 were fitted using the reduced sample of 51 municipalities, for which we had 2002 residential segregation data, and this time we used the 1999 index as the outcome variable. As shown in Table 3, Model 1 contains the proportions of enrollment at municipal level that attended the 3 different types of private schools as the main predictor variables. The participation of municipal schools was omitted, distinguishing between voucher private schools with and without the co-payment system. The estimated coefficients indicate that the proportion of enrollment in both voucher private schools with co-payment system and non-subsidized private schools is statistically significant predictors of SES school segregation at municipal level. Model 1 also shows that the level of enrollment in free voucher schools was not related to SES school segregation. In other words, at municipal level, the larger the proportion of fee-paying private schools, the larger the SES school segregation. To deepen this analysis, Model 2 incorporates the number of each of the 4 types of schools as predictor variables. Inspection of the estimates from Model 2 shows that the introduction of the additional covariates had little impact on the previously estimated coefficients, suggesting that the relationship between fee-paying private enrollment and SES school segregation is fairly robust. Recall that all those models controlled for a set of relevant additional covariates. Increasingly, Model 2 indicates that the number of voucher private schools without shared financing is also positively related to the SES school segregation, pointing out that the mere presence of private schools, even if they are free for the families, is a factor of segregation among schools. Finally, the standardized coefficients related to each factor reported in Table 3.2 allow the magnitude of their estimated effects on SES school segregation to be directly compared. Therefore, the proportion of private fee-paying enrollment at a municipal level emerges as the most closely linked factor to SES school segregation, followed by the proportion of voucher private enrollment with shared financing. Both results lead to the same conclusion. Municipalities with higher fee-paying private school enrollment tend to have more segregated schools. The key limitation of Model 1 and 2 is that they do not control for SES residential segregation. Hence, we attempted to overcome this problem by adding the index for residential segregation as a covariate in Model 3 and Models 3 and 4. These specifications have a reduced sample size, because residential segregation could be estimated only for larger municipalities. Thus, our main purpose has to test whether the observed differences in the level of SES school segregation among municipalities were explained by the differences in the residential segregation and not by the educational market variables that we have discussed.